This is Health UnaBASHed, broadcasting live on Healthcare Now Radio. Health UnaBASHed is a conversational platform where healthcare meets innovation. We engage top industry talent and dive into the heart of health and wellness, from vision to business model, to bring you the latest developments in health tech, from promising AI applications, policy, to ultimately meaningful impact on the public's health and well-being. I'm Gregg Masters, co-host and executive producer, and am joined by the digital health aficionado himself, author, editor, global thought leader, and in his executive capacity, steward servant Gil Bashe. Together, we're on a mission to bring you the people, the ideas, and the companies that are not just talking the talk, but walking the talk. On today's menu, we are in the company of Dr. Walter Greenleaf, a neuroscientist and a medical technology developer working at Stanford University with over 3 decades of research and development experience. Dr. Greenleaf is considered a leading authority in the field of digital medicine and medical virtual reality technology. Dr. Greenleaf's current research is focusing on developing computer-supported clinical products with a specific emphasis on applying virtual reality and digital health technology to address difficult problems in behavioral and physical medicine, such as post-traumatic stress, anxiety disorders, depression, traumatic brain injury and stroke, addictions, and autism spectrum disorder. So with no further delay, Gil, the mic is yours.
Gregg, I want to thank you so much for all your fine work. And also, I want to remind our listeners to tune into you on Healthcare Now Radio for Pop Health Week. You and Fred Goldstein have an incredible show. I hear in the coming weeks you have a very special guest scheduled, and I cannot wait to see what you've got in store. For our listeners, we have someone I have looked forward to having on Health UnaBASHed for quite some time, actually for a few years now. And it's not that he's hard to nail down. It's just that I had to sort of eyeball him. We were together at CNS Summit in early November in Boston. And Walter Greenleaf, everybody who's involved in health innovation should get to know Walter Greenleaf, or Dr. Walter Greenleaf. Walter is a neuroscientist. He is a medical technology developer at Stanford University. That's his home. He is not just considered, he is likely the leading authority on digital health applications. And he's been doing this for some 35 years. He's been involved in the research, product development experience. He has helped create companies. He's led companies. He's been chief science officer of some of the edgiest, most watched digital health innovation companies. He has been involved in designing, developing, validating clinical systems that leverage the biosensing of AI, I call it augmented implementation. We'll see what Walter calls it. And obviously, XR technologies. Walter is an expert on behavioral health, on physical medicine, on depression, on anxiety, on traumatic brain injury and stroke, addictions, autism spectrum disorder. He brings all of that knowledge to the table of innovation. Walter, thank you so much for joining us today. It is a real pleasure every time we have a chance to chat. And I wanted to kick this off. You were really one of the early ins on digital health innovation. So I've got to say, from the neuroscientist component, how did you begin the journey on medical technologies?
Well, it's wonderful to be here with you, Gil and Gregg, and it's an interesting story. I'll try and be very succinct about it, but in a way, I got into medical technology out of a bit of laziness. I was working as a grad student, and I had set up a psychophysiology lab in the Department of Physiology at Stanford, and I was collecting several channels of data from sensors, respiration, heart rate, pulse amplitude, and we were scoring the data with a ruler back in those days because the signals were coming out on a grass polygraph as ink on paper. So to score our respiratory rates, we got our ruler out. We measured the intra-breath interval and the amplitude. same for peripheral pulse amplitude and other signals. And I just found that, and we only really scored a representative sample. So if we had an hour session, we would maybe score 10% of it. I found that too inefficient and too excruciating, and I was not focused enough to really go all the way. So I thought, hey, it'll be easy if I just teach myself some electrical engineering, interface those instruments to an Apple II computer. If I teach myself a little bit of assembly language coding and do an A to D conversion of those signals and write some algorithms to score it. I was a little bit naive about how long it would take. But once I had a system up and going, the guys down the hallway who were doing sleep research said, could you help? Could we have access to what you're working on? Could you help us with it? And I ended up having a company spin out of that because I could not put time to it away from my dissertation research. So we hired assistants to write the manual and to improve the code. Long story short, I learned I liked publishing a medical product more than I liked publishing academic papers. And ever since then, I've kept one foot in the academic arena and one foot in the product development medtech arena.
Now, I'd like to say that you're saying that laziness is the mother of invention, but that's not true. You're always ambitious and busy, that I know. Now, you're on the board of some 30 different enterprises. You're either a scientific advisor or a medical advisor. You've stepped in as sort of chief medical officer or chief scientific officer on some companies. You're on publicly traded companies. You're on privately held companies. You're on major, sort of government-like or NGO commissions. Of all the things that you're doing in addition to the work that you do through Stanford University and your independent consultancies, are there some things you're doing right now that you say, folks, watch these companies super closely? I am so excited when I get up in the morning. I just can't wait to get on the phone with some of these colleagues. What's super hot? I know you love them all. I'm going to give that as the caveat so nobody feels neglected. But what are some of the super hot things you're up to right now?
Well, thanks for the caveat, because I often do feel like you're asking me to name my favorite book out of all the books I love to read or my favorite child. But there are some areas of development that I'm particularly excited about. I've been very concerned about the fact that in mental health, we've been hampered in our research by not having more objective measurements of cognitive or emotional states. These are often very subjective measurements, self-report or observation, analog and noisy. But we're now with machine learning and AI analytics and better sensor technology, we're now coming up with a whole wave of technology that can help us in a more objective manner measure a emotional state and the changes in emotional state. We can also elicit and challenge individuals using AR and VR immersive systems. So it's not just a static measurement of how someone might be feeling, what emotions they might have, but it's in response to a stimulus. That's so powerful. So Gil, what I would say, keep your eyes on, is many of the research groups and early stage companies that are coming up with more objective measurements of cognitive state and emotional state.
Along those lines, I think we have these expectations for some of these companies, and we kind of compare them to sort of these mammoth tech companies, and we sort of say, gee, is this area of investment going to make it? Because they never seem to get to the Microsoft-like level, or on the biopharmaceutical side, they don't get to be the mid-sized sort of biopharmaceutical company. I personally think our metrics of what success is way off in these categories. And I think also the trajectory of, I expect them to be successful, by this time. They've been in business for 5 years. Why haven't they hit their first $1 billion already? I'm wondering if the pressure we place on these technologies for them to get sufficient market traction and be infused within the medical community is actually crushing innovation, as opposed to allowing it to actually rise to a level. And I sometimes wonder, do the big behemoth tech companies kind of like that because it allows them later to sort of swoon in, or sort of dive in and bring it to the next step. So for instance, I want to speak something that I think is so close to your heart. You're really one of the pioneers of our nation, which is, VR. Which I don't like the name of that either, virtual reality. To me, it's really extended reality of the human imagination. But VR in the application of medicine, you get some clinicians who are really super strong. We have a lot of friends who are doing that. I think people like Shafi and Raphael Grossman and all that are really at the sort of like state of the art utilization of this and are toying and playing and applying constantly. But I don't think a lot of surgeons really are happy or are ready to leap in to the universe that you've helped create. I mean, what's your thought about, well, culture crushing innovation?
Well, I think there's several questions embedded in what you just said. I think to talk about culture crushing innovation, I do think that the model that we have right now of indexing success for these really amazing creative companies that are spinning out of academia or aggregating from people who have expertise in technology and clinical care and medical business, I think the time course for the funding returns of the investors that look at that zone isn't aligned with the time course of how long it takes to move the needle. So that may take 6 or 7 years to mature some of this technology, but if the investors are coming in and their limited partners require a return on investment within of 40x within 5 years, it may take longer. So you're right. Often when these companies get into a low Earth orbit and the orbit is decaying because they're running out of time and funding, that's when they might be acquired. There are more efficient systems. And I think if we index success based on impact, as opposed to financial revenue, for example, it may be a better way to size the investment time course and returns. I also think many of these companies would do well to focus on being, as opposed to growing up fast like weeds, to be more of a carefully tended garden that doesn't necessarily need to have the expensive venture money, but could be based upon other funds. And I'm excited to see some of the impact investors that are moving into the zone to look at where there's some white space opportunities or where there's some need and on those.
I was just speaking at a conference called Hit Lab, great conference, and my title of my talk was the rise, fall, and rebirth of digital health.
Yeah.
And I talked about how all these companies, from my experience, are running after money. They're always talking about their success of, I just closed a Series A, I just closed a Series B. I was looking to raise 30 million, I raised 25 million. And that's the mark of their success is money raised. And I spoke about how, and maybe this is sort of a snippet of your life. I mean, having gone to Stanford, really one of this nation's great centers for health innovation. I mean, establishing the mindset of health innovation. And my counsel to a lot of these companies that I was speaking to at the conference was, don't rush to raise money as fast as you think. Money is always going to be out there. I'm not saying it's available, but out there. My counsel was focus on connecting to an incubator or an accelerator of quality first and foremost. Further hone the idea, get more sort of market intelligence from being inside the system, and then having been through an incubator or accelerator, then sort of refine and go out and raise your money on the strength of the experience.
I agree with that. I can't wait till we get to the term digital health is meaningless. That is just healthcare. That technology is just an implicit part of how we provide healthcare. We're on our way to that, I think. And I think one of the things that will make a difference is now that the tech titans are moving into healthcare. One example is the Apple Watch, which people may buy because they want to have more of an interface to their cell phone or more physiological data that's collected. But it can also be used as a diagnostic system too. And so I think we will see the next interface between us and our buildings, our automobiles, our work environment, and each other is going to be systems that understand us. We'll be using wearable sensor technology, webcam technology, ubiquitous sensor technology to adjust the user interface based on our cognitive impairment level, our alertness level, our mood. And that's going to be built in, I think, to the future generations of interface. And as a result, we're going to have such rich data that can also be used to support us with cognitive aging or with mental health and wellness issues. So I do think that that barrier that you talked about of how do we have innovations in health tech scale to such a way that it can then be moved out from just a small company to the broader ecosystem. I think we'll have the platforms to do that. And I think it will come from, right now, the companies that are focused on consumer technology. I think consumer technology will be interwoven with health tech technology.
Just dropping in, you're right on time for Health Unabashed on Healthcare Now Radio. Today, we're chatting with Dr. Walter Greenleaf, a neuroscientist and medical technology developer working at Stanford University with over 3 decades of research and development experience. Stay tuned for the rest of the story.
To that end, I was thinking, I get very concerned about health inequities and particularly age disparament, sort of age discrimination. And I see it particularly in not so much our skilled generation, but the generation that's just above us, the GI generation, the silent generation, where they were latecomers to cell phones or iPhones and smartphone technology and so forth. You and I sort of grew up really talking about it, imagining it, pursuing it. And so, we were early adopters to these technologies. But the generation above us, I find that they need it the most right now, the connectivity of health technologies, of wearables, of remote technology, and yet they have the least amount of access. That's one element I'm concerned about. I'd like your thoughts on. The other aspect is actually the economics of the health system. That while we wearables and remote, whether it's telehealth or other tools of remote patient monitoring through technology, seems to be so sensible and so valuable, yet it is so undervalued by the economics of our system, payers, for instance, or Medicare, Medicaid, that it's not. Doctors aren't incentivized to go that route. Their time isn't valued in that route, and their economic needs aren't addressed through that route. How are we going to reconcile our capabilities in terms of our technological ability with the fact that doctors say, yeah, I'd love to be able to see how they're doing just by looking at my computer screen or dashboard, but I'm not going to, from a fee-for-service standpoint, I'm not going to get paid for that. Or I'm not going to get paid well from that, so forget it. Have Mrs. Smith sit in the waiting room for 45 minutes till I can see her because I get a higher rate of reimbursement. How do we reconcile all this?
Those are two big issues, and I will tell you my thoughts. One is regarding our seniors, and as they go through the healthcare system, and I've got 3 major healthcare areas that I'm concerned about, and at the top of the list is our aging population. I know that in the next 10 to 15 years, unless we get ahead of it, our economy could be impacted more than global warming will impact it. And believe me, I worry about global warming too. But with the smaller family sizes and generations living so much longer than previous generations, it's going to be expensive unless we come up with better ways to support aging in place and senior care. And the good news is that next generation technology is easier to use for seniors than it would be for anyone else. I mean, they have systems where you can talk to an agent about an AI agent that can help you navigate through complex systems or that can accomplish tasks for you. It's not going to be the world of typing onto a small screen in the future. It's going to be the world of talking to your technology and having your technology understand you and understanding your goals and your desires and your predilections and your impairments and adjusting its behavior to support you. So I think that concern you have about tech not being suitable for seniors, and I've seen it as we deploy VR systems to and other systems to support our senior care. It's so much easier to use and so much more impactful than a cell phone or a laptop. So the concerns we've had about the technology barrier. Now there is the access barrier that you mentioned, and that's a different issue. And when we talk about the incentives and lining up technology rolling out, given the constraints of an overburdened and burnt out healthcare system, I do think that it's the division we have right now between clinical and wellness will soon evaporate. And I think as we use more technology and get better at using technology to support wellness, it will also move into, and the business model will change too in healthcare. So I don't think 10 years from now, or even maybe 7 or 6 years from now, we will have the same structures in terms of supporting clinical care economically. I think we will leverage technology, it will provide efficiencies, and ideally the business models will adjust to that. And again, I think it's the introduction of the tech giants will make a big difference there. For better or for worse, I think.
Yeah, for better and for worse. I agree with you there. You know, maybe 2 years ago, we saw a slew of high-profile health tech companies stumble. Some you know quite well.
Yes.
Obviously, we saw, after all the fanfare, Babylon Health close its doors. We saw Pear Therapeutics close its doors. We saw Olive close its doors. And, you know, to some extent, people, and I think they were way off base, sort of said, there you go. That's the value of this category. It's not really ready for prime time. Now, I disagree with that. I could speak to many reasons why those three enterprises, among others, just didn't get to the next stage. But I was wondering if you have any advice for the the slew of startups that exist right now as they're venturing in. If you were to say, based upon your expertise, you're consulting with many companies, government, VC firms, you know, academic institutions. If you were to sort of say, hey, this is Dr. Walter Greenleaf's sort of counsel to you, focus on these, you know, 3 or 4 things, what would you recommend?
Well, I think part of it is where to focus, what areas of need to focus on, and part of it is having the right business model. Often these early stage companies may have the expertise in technology. They may have they may know gaming. They may know biosensing. They may know how to put together a good user interface and roll out a product and address an important clinical problem. They don't understand the business of healthcare, the dynamics of a clinical ecosystem, so that the ethnography and anthropology of designing these products is often poorly done. And unless you understand the business model and the constraints of your users and customers, it doesn't matter how validated your product is and how impactful, it's not going to scale, it's not going to go anyplace. That would be the major advice, is understand the niche you're going into and the ecology of that niche, the business ecology. And in terms of, I guess the only other thing I would say is, look, there's 4 major areas of crisis in healthcare right now. One is the issue of an aging population that we mentioned earlier, but there's also the crisis of our youth and mental health. And I think, again, with more objective measurements of cognitive and emotional status, I think we are poised to come up with new assessments and new therapeutics that support mental and cognitive health. So I would say, look where the acute needs are, of course. And then I think the third area is addressing the inefficiencies that we currently have in our system. There's opportunities, I think, to do more than just provide healthcare. I think there's opportunities to provide using AI technology and better analytics, systems that aren't directly interfacing with the clinician or the patient, but are taking the data sets that are out there, doing more data mining and coming up with more precise ways of segmenting and applying and technology for better healthcare. So, you know, it's the usual thing, Gil, of you need to stand on the hill and survey the terrain before you jump in. And those are things that I think often, under the glee and excitement of coming up with something that has impact that often a startup has, you often don't take the time to step back and look at the landscape.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that I would only add that I don't think that they appreciate who's going to pay for it. In other words, that whether it's private or public reimbursement or, sort of like cost per use, I don't think they have an economic model that is in tune with how health works. And I think that they stumble over that eventually. They have what they feel is a great need that they're enthusiastic about, but they haven't looked at the fact that the complexity of this nation's health system is sort of like a swamp. They don't really know how to traverse that swamp. So these are great points. Very quickly, it's hard for me to believe that we've wrapped up and we're at the end. You're always on a main stage. I get the chance to wave when you're on the main stage of Health or Vive, other places. Where are you going to be in the next few months, where people can sort of listen, learn, and then run after you as you get from the main stage to the floor?
Well, I'm looking at around the time of the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, there's the Biotech Showcase, and that's an excellent opportunity. I'll be there. And NextMed, Daniel Kraft's conference was pushed back a little bit, but I'll be there. But no, I hope to be out at the conferences that you mentioned, plus others. At this stage of my life, this chapter of my life, what I'm hoping to do is help those early stage companies that you mentioned, help them move forward and start promulgating what they're doing through the larger healthcare ecosystem. So you'll run across me at other venues.
No, I will, and I'm looking forward to all of those opportunities. I just want to say to our listeners, and particularly those who are really in the field, that Walter, you are one of the most accessible, willing to share your knowledge, your experience, offer words of support to startup enterprises in the digital health area. And you've really become an incredible asset to the industry's success. I want to thank you for joining us today with Gregg and our listeners, and I want to wish you continued energy and success to keep innovation on track. Walter, thank you.
Well, thank you, Gil. I've enjoyed the conversation.
And that, dear listeners, is the last note for today's melody. A huge thank you to our worldwide audience for tuning in, and a tip of the hat to our special guest, Dr. Walter Greenleaf, a neuroscientist and a medical technology developer working at Stanford University. Do follow Dr. Greenleaf's work on Twitter via @WalterGreenleaf. Health Unabashed streams live 3 times a day on Healthcare Now Radio, Monday through Friday at 10:30 a.m., 6:30 p.m., and 2:30 a.m. Eastern. That's 7:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m., and 11:30 p.m. Pacific. Stay social with Gil and me on Twitter via @Gil_Bashe, and that's BASHE, and Gregg Masters MPH, and that's Gregg with 2 G's. Don't forget to give your tweet some zing with our hashtag #HealthUnabashed. Until we meet again, pursue your passion for better health and with no apologies.